Well, welcome back to another episode, you guys, of Dare to Daydream. And if you've been on this podcast and listened for a minute now, you know, or if you've just know me personally, there's two things I enjoy talking about. The first one is leadership, particular, business coaching and leadership, and the second is looking at things from a holistic lens. And my next guest definitely checks both of those boxes. And it's April Diaz. April is an executive coach helping high capacity leaders expand their influence and impact holistically. April, thanks for being here.
Michael, it's so good to be here and to be with your audience. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know I've studied some of the stuff you have put out and on social media and on your website. And so I have to ask you before we get into too many of the questions. The first one has to be, because I love a good story. I love a good business story, and I love the inspiration. Take me back to March of 2019, scrambled eggs, champagne, and butterflies. What does this date represent for you personally and professionally?
Yeah, it was just over 6 years ago, which feels both like a lifetime ago and like a nanosecond. Um, so I'll actually even rewind you back to March of 2018. I had gotten fired from a job that had mattered to me by a really good friend that just blindsided me. It was borderline illegal. The reasons for him firing me were unsubstantiated and unfair, to be easy. And it just felt like the bottom dropped out. It sent me kind of into a tailspin of like, what am I supposed to do with my life? And yet I had had whispers for about probably the previous 4 to 6 months of this wasn't right. And I needed to figure out a pivot. I needed to figure out a way to off ramp my work with this company specifically, and to really pay deeper attention to vision and dreams that were within me that, quite honestly, I was just too afraid to pursue. Because, a job is stable. Like, I was freelancing. I wasn't working full time for this company, but it was influence, and it was relationship, and I was doing good work. And so it just felt safe, and it felt like something that I could use my gifts and my skills in a good way. But I knew that there was more. And I just honestly was too afraid to take the jump. And so fast forward into March 2018, I get fired, the bottom falls out. And I just have one of these like crises. Like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Where am I supposed to go from here? How am I supposed to provide for my family? And that process took an entire year. And in part, it took an entire year because I knew that I needed to forgive the guy who fired me. And I needed to heal from the collateral damage that experience did. And I knew that I wouldn't start something else until I had been able to release that and let that go. Because I'd seen a lot of other companies and leaders, just really push through the pain and not grieve or not heal. And the impact into their new work, it was felt. It was like that baggage had been carried with them. And so I was like, come hell or high water, I am going to really do the work here internally so that when I do whatever is next, it's coming from a place of healing. It's coming from a place of wholeness. It's coming from a place of like just goodness. And so March 2019, butterflies, champagne, scrambled eggs. That was the day, March 15th. Or March 13th. I can't really remember. It's like a couple of days that, depending on paperwork and filing for a company. But that was the time when I launched Ezer. And I had my lawyer friend come over to the house, and it was 9:00 in the morning. And I knew that we needed to have some champagne to toast this, because I was like, I've never started a company before. It feels like a momentous thing. We should do something to kind of celebrate and commemorate this event. And I made her scrambled eggs and poured the champagne at 9:00 in the morning, and we went to go sit out on my patio. And I didn't realize that specific day, there was a migration of butterflies from Mexico up through California, or maybe it was the opposite way. I don't remember. But I live in Southern California, and this migration was literally millions of butterflies that were migrating. And the logo of our company is a butterfly. A butterfly has always had deep significance to me personally. And so I knew that was going to be, that was going to be the logo for the company, is just this imagery of transformation and of flying and of like reaching new heights. And we're sitting out on my patio, and literally like these painted butterflies filled the sky. It was, Michael, it was the craziest, most like divine, serendipitous, overwhelming experience to see all of these. And it felt like just this little kiss from God of, you're launching something really beautiful. And there's this beautiful movement that's taking place in nature and within you, and as the start of this company begins. And so we toasted, and there were tears, and it was a really beautiful moment.
Wow. So much to unpack here.
Couldn't have planned it. I mean, I literally couldn't have planned it.
Yeah.
It felt divine.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, okay, to back up. So, you're dropping some words on here, trigger words in a good way that we love on this podcast. And the first one, you talked about hearing the whisper, right? And I think I don't think a lot of times in business, and I want to kind of pick your brain on what you see at Ezer when you're coaching different executives, is a lot of times, we hear about we should heal with our life problems, and we should, listen to our intuition and our gut of like, oh, I should turn left here and not right, or, just a certain thing in life. But I don't think a lot of people then put that into a business context. And I think that's a beautiful story that, you took a
Mm-hmm.
year to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about that for a second, April. Like, do you
Mm-hmm.
think, had you just dove in, you know, all in, I've got my back against the wall, I have to start this company, I have to go do what's next and make money, do you think you would have
Yeah.
had this serendipitous moment had you not waited a year and healed and grieved and thought, okay, now I know my intuition was
Mm-hmm.
correct in the first place? Like, do you think that year was
Mm-hmm.
more than just, waiting for the right time? Was it just all the healing that you did as well?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I really believe to be true is that your whole story matters. And I mean, I've talked about this in my own life, in my parenting, in the way that our family was formed, and then certainly in the start of this company, was that you can't ignore, deny, shut off, turn away from a part of your story and not have it have consequences. And so I knew that when I got fired, I was joining a club that I'd always kind of bragged on. I was like, some of the best people I've ever known have been fired from jobs. And then I got initiated into the club, and I was like, this club sucks. No one wants to be fired from a job. Like, I'm too good for this, right? And but I knew, like, in that moment too, that it was for something, right? Like, things don't happen just to you, they happen for you. And in that firing, I just knew that if I sped into the next thing, which is 100% my natural tendency, I am a go-getter, I am ambitious, I am goals driven, I have lots of dreams. I knew that that was within my access, that I could just low hanging fruit, steam barrel into the next thing. But there was enough like wisdom within me, or enough of experience and mentors in my ear too, that was like, if you don't slow down and let this story integrate and internalize and metabolize through you, it can become problematic, and you will become the thing that you don't like, right? Like, whatever we don't forgive, we become. And so I just had this really deep sense that I needed to take the time. So I don't know if the butterflies would have happened on that day. I don't know how the timing all would have gone. You never know once you make a decision in turn how the domino effects will fall in one way or the other. But I do just know that that was the right choice. And it was
Mm-hmm.
hard, absolutely, but it was right. And I think the right things you never regret, even if they are hard.
Mm-hmm. April, with that transition and you get through the healing stage, what would you say is the biggest internal shift that you went from, employee to, fully stepping into your role as a founder and a leader?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think some of it, and maybe this is a part of the healing that I didn't even know needed to happen, but it was to really trust myself, to trust my gut, to trust my experience, to trust my skills, to trust my story up until then. I had spent 20 years building other people's visions. And one of the moments that happened for me in March of 2018 was a couple weeks after I got fired. I woke up and was like on the verge of a full blown panic attack. And I'm not someone who kind of historically struggles with anxiety, but there's been times where the anxiety has been real prevalent. And so I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I went out onto the patio of our house and I grabbed a blanket on the way out and threw it over my shoulders. We live in Southern California, but it still gets chilly in the middle of March, in the middle of the night. And I sat on the patio and I had this blanket wrapped around me and I was just looking at the stars and I was sobbing because I felt so much loss. I felt so much betrayal. I felt so much anxiety and fear about the future and what was going to happen with my family and could we pay the bills and, all those things. And I was just watching the stars and it was just a beautiful, calm, still night. But as I'm sobbing and hoping to avoid this panic attack, I looked down and the blanket that I had grabbed off the back of the couch was actually the blanket that the guy who had just fired me had given me for Christmas.
Oh,
And
wow.
I felt like this instantaneous, like every nerve just kind of came alive and like shackles and goosebumps. And I looked at that blanket and said a number of choice words. And I wanted to just throw that blanket over the balcony. So I was like, I can't believe it. And I had this moment where this hasn't happened many times in my life, but I had this moment where I really felt like I heard God say to me, He doesn't cover you. I cover you. I got you. For 20 years, you've built other men's visions. It's time for you to build the vision that I've given you. And to say that the like anxiety like left and like this peace washed over me is an understatement. Like there was a complete physiological shift in my body. And I kept the blanket on me because it wasn't about him. Like it wasn't about this thing that he had given me. And I just had this deep sense again that like this gift that was given to me from him that now felt like a curse was actually going to be transferred and redeemed and restored into something very different than what it was intended or what it was in that moment. And so, yeah, I don't even remember where we started in that question that you asked. It's a great question. But like, I just had this really deep sense of like, I need to do this journey differently in order to really internalize like what is going to come so that it can be the fullness and I'm not holding it back in any way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a beautiful look at things, and some of the loudest whispers are in the middle of the night like that, aren't they? uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
what an
Cause you're
amazing
still enough,
experience.
right? Like you're not
Yeah.
distracted. You're not like filling your head with all the noise. You're not, yeah, it's not all there. It's the still and the calm that allows for that whisper to be heard.
Yeah. April, Ezer and Company focuses on high capacity leaders expanded holistically. And what does that actually mean to you? What does leading holistically actually look like in business practice for you? And how do you coach that and teach that to your clients?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been a leader basically my whole life and I've been leading, in a formalized paid capacity for 25 plus years. And one of the things like looking back is that leadership was really taught to me and expressed to me like it was something external. It was about the skills and the KPIs and the metrics and the outcomes, but there was little to no conversation about like the inside of the leader and who the leader was becoming and where these decisions and actions and all of that stuff was coming from. And so actually it was about 20 years ago, I got introduced to my very first coach. He's quite literally one of the best in the world. And he introduced me to a more holistic leadership framework. And so he coached me for a full year and really walked me through who are you becoming in every part of your life and how does that then show up in your leadership. And so it was everything from, physical and emotional and mental. He did rest and recovery. There was a spiritual component, a relational component. It was a very comprehensive look at it. And what I realized from the work that we did together was that I was barreling towards burnout. My mental engagement and disengagement was catastrophic. Like it was so bad. And I had almost no rest and recovery. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week, loving my work, but still there wasn't a time for recovery. I wasn't taking it. And so he completely like reoriented what does it look like to really lead, with more of your whole self in every space. And so that really, honestly, it changed the trajectory of my leadership. And then I started kind of experimenting and exploring, what does it look like for me to not just show up and do the work and then, disconnect or disengage or, it's like segment myself out of this work, but to really bring myself holistically. So I don't know if that answers your full question, but that was kind of the origin of it. And over the last 20 years, I've been doing more and more work in really figuring out, like, what does it look like for me, but also what am I seeing with other leaders? And I think we're at a bit of a cross section or like a turning point in a leadership way that we just got to do leadership differently, because it's so much of it is not working, and we're seeing the consequences of it. We're seeing what it looks like for leaders to just blow out their life and end poorly or end early or destroy people and systems along the way. And I'm just pretty convinced that holistic leadership is the way forward.
I 100% agree with that. I've had a couple of guests on here and we've talked about that. It's trending towards a new way of leadership and unpacking a deeper layer to that. So, April, when you coach a lot of strong leaders. With that said, what do you think most of them are craving at the underneath the achievement and the performance? Right? It's like go, go, go at the top level, but what are they truly craving underneath all of that?
I think the easy answer is balance, but I don't think that's the deepest. I think they want to feel alive. I don't think they want to feel like a cog in the machine or that they're a human doing. There's this really deep sense of like, I want to feel alive and fully myself in every space, personally, professionally, at home, with my partner, with my kids, with my friends, in meetings, in the boardroom. Like there's this, I am my whole self. There's not this dormancy or stuckness or death or coma, like all of those types of words I've heard from leaders in both the positive and the negative. And leaders, I think they just want to feel like human beings and fully alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You agree? What do you think?
No, I do agree. I was just thinking about it because treat it as a human, right? Because a lot of times I think we put these, especially at the C-suite level, is they're almost like robots at the top that don't have a pulse. And the more they're treated like that, the more they're going to act like that. Well, if you want me to be a tyrant,
Correct.
and be the CEO, the COO, the CFO, I will start showing less emotion, less, and some of the greatest, I feel like, teachers now are saying, hey, it's okay to look at your people and go, I don't know, I'll figure it out and you can help me. Right. But to have someone at that level be vulnerable and go, actually, I don't know the answer to that, but let's figure it out together.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's needed.
Yeah. I was in a conversation with one of my mentors recently, and I was kind of whining and lamenting about like all the things that I don't know as a leader right now, and all of the ambiguity or the confusion and blah. I'm not sure. And she just paused and she said, April, none of us know what we're doing. We're all out over our skis. And I've been thinking a lot about that language and that reality, because I think that a huge part of leadership is that you're taking people to new places that we've never been before, right? Like leadership by nature and design is creating a vision for the future that you're moving into. And we've never been there before. So of course you're not going to know, right? Like you're having to figure it out along the way. And so there was something so normalizing and calming and reassuring in the midst of the, I don't know what the hell's going on, to be able to acknowledge that we are figuring this out as we go. And it's just such a much more human way of leading. And I think that people on the team or the followers or whoever, stakeholders, they actually, in a healthy context, they actually appreciate that. And actually adds to the authority to have that vulnerability to be like, we're figuring it out and it's together. And that just feels so much more sustainable and healthy and holistic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's that fine line of where people want a leader who leads, goes, makes decisions,
Mm-hmm.
but the
Yeah.
fine line of
Yeah.
saying, hey, there's going to be times when I don't know, and I'm going to let you know and be vulnerable. And I'm still leading. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still taking action. I'm taking massive action, but
Yeah.
I'm not,
There you go.
this might be a path I've not yet explored. Full disclosure.
Yes,
um,
absolutely. Absolutely. Agree.
April, you have something in your program that some of the things that you teach called Define Your Goals Guide. So what inspired the Define
Yeah.
Your Goals Guide, and how's it differ from like a traditional
Yeah.
goal setting method?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is I have noticed over the years, I was certified as a coach in 2013. So I've been doing this for a hot minute. And one of the things that I've noticed, particularly for women, is that a lot of times we enter in the conversation of the things that I should be doing. And I want to elevate the conversation from not shoulding all over yourself, or even saying I have to do this, right? Like I have to get my shit together. I have to get it all in order because this is like the responsibility and the weight and this is necessary for me, into a place of want. And that elevation from should to have to want is pretty huge. But what I have noticed is that most people, especially women, don't know what they want. They might have more of an idea of what they don't want, or some ambiguous, vague idea of what they want, but real clarity and specificity of this is what I want takes a hot minute. It's there. It is just a little bit underneath the surface, but it takes some pulling out. Um, and so what I have done with this Define Your Goal Guide, and we have a proprietary wholeness assessment as well, is to help elevate the conversation into what is it that you actually want. So the Define Your Goal Guide it's a pretty simple 4-step process to take the assessment, to see what opportunities are low hanging fruit or offer the greatest potential to be catalyzed into a big win, and then to articulate that and to do it alongside and to name the people that are going to support and hold you accountable to getting what it is that you want. And as that process is defined, you have a very high, like a 95% chance of actually achieving the goal that matters to you, because you've taken the time to dig in deep and actually put language to define, that desire. And then what I've noticed is on the other side of like, I want this, it elevates to another level even of going, I get to do this. So it's not like I should get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure that I get a workout in and drink my water and, have a morning meditation. I should do that. But when you define what you want, then it actually transitions that from like this really base thing to like, I get to wake up at 6 a.m. I get to take care of my body. I get to focus my mind. I get to have that first hour of the day when the house is quiet and the sun is rising to do this for me. I should do this, but it's so much greater and carries such a deeper weight. And so I've just noticed that, again, it's a simple process, but it really helps to bring that clarity and that alignment for leaders when we start our work together.
Mm. I've noticed it's so, and I feel like this is aligned with what you're saying. It's so powerful how we speak to ourselves, like the message that we. And I started doing it to myself in the
Mm-hmm.
car. I'll start, sometimes I say things to myself that I would want somebody else to tell me that I know they're true, but it's almost like a
Yeah.
weird psychological thing of like hearing it out
Yeah.
loud. And to your point,
Mm-hmm.
it's the privilege. I get to do this versus I have to. I get to serve in this
Mm-hmm.
manner.
Yeah.
And it reminds me
Yeah.
of something I read not long ago. I feel like is spot on with what you're saying is, are we, how did it read? Are we running towards something or running away from, the past? And I feel like that's kind of mind
Yeah.
shift of like, what am I going
Mm-hmm.
towards? What do I get to do today?
Mm-hmm.
So I really
Yeah.
love that
Yeah. It's a total game
mindset.
changer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So you make a distinction between a smart goal and a wise goal. Can you break that down for me and
Mm-hmm.
maybe give me an example of your definition of a SMART goal and a WISE goal in your teachings?
Yeah. So this is a part of the Define Your Goal guide too. And, as a leader and as a coach, I was taught from a really early age, you make your goals smart, right? You make them specific and measurable and attainable, or attractive is actually my preferred A of that word. You make it relative, and then you make it time bound, right? That's how you make a goal. And it is smart. But it's really honestly just been over the last probably 2 to 3 years in coaching executive women, particularly, that I have noticed a lot of their goals aren't smart, they are wise. And what I have met and seen in that is that the goals that they have, the desires that they have aren't, with that acronym, you can't acronym them out, but it comes from this really deep place of this aliveness, this sense of like coming back to myself, this deeper gut knowing that, again, it isn't smart, but it has this wisdom to it, like this deeper inner knowledge and sense. And at the end of like our 6 month coaching journey, they have this sense, this belief within them of like, did I do it or did I not? But you can't check the box in the same way as you would like, I've lost 20 pounds, right? Like that is a smart goal. But sometimes the wise goal is, I want to articulate or create a vision board for what I want my life to look like in 5 years. Or I want to come back to myself. I had a leader that I was coaching that said, I want, it was her goal was something like, I want to reclaim the belief that I'm a badass. And it was connected to the last time that she did, which was when she was in high school. And now she's in her 40s. And, you can't smart goal becoming, reclaiming the belief that I'm a badass, right? Like, how do you measure that? But at the end of the 6 months, she's like, oh, I'm there. She just knew. And I think that, again,
Wow.
particularly for women, but I think this is still true for men, there is some of this deep inner knowing that we need to honor and we need to reclaim. And so I've just kind of like surrendered to the, sometimes goals need to be wise. They don't need to be smart. And I will trust you at the end of the journey to be like, did you accomplish it or did you not? Because at the end of the day, I still want my clients to get big wins and for them to like know that they know that they know that they got it. But a wise goal doesn't have the same easy check marks as a smart goal does. So that's what I've seen.
Okay. So what's one like roadblock, or like what's one thing that you see is like the most common roadblock, I guess is probably the best word to use, that a leader gets stuck
Mm-hmm.
on, right? They can set these goals, but is there something common, like they just get in their own way with one thing in particular?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably too general, so feel free to poke into it. But I mean, we just get on our own way in whatever
Hmm.
way. It's some sort of limiting belief or some sort of past narrative experience or something that someone has told us along the way that we've accepted as reality, um, or even something within our own bodies that we kind of, yeah, we just hold ourselves back into. And so I think that the most difficult person you will ever lead is yourself. And a huge, huge kind of central rock, a pillar of our work is that it is all about self leadership. And that is like both your
Hmm.
greatest opportunity and your greatest roadblock. So if you're not leading yourself
Hmm.
holistically, then forget all the external outcomes. They just won't happen, because it all begins and ends with us.
No, I think that's spot on. I think one of the things I've studying in, some of the meditations I've done, and again, this is how it goes from personal that translates right into businesses. We let the narrative of the past just run wild in our brains. Well, that's how it was before. This is how it's going to be in the future,
Yeah.
right? Like if you would have just,
Yep.
not had
Yep.
that kind of aha moment at midnight with the blanket, right, or heard that God whisper, like,
Yeah.
well, this is the blanket of my former, boss, and
Yeah.
this is how it was, and this is how it's going to be, right? Like, but you have that
Yep.
mind shift of like, no, I have a choice of exploring, the
Yep.
unknown future with a positive twist on it. And once you give yourself that freedom of like, um I'm going to go to a different place here, so hang with me. Do you ever
Yeah,
hear
yeah, yeah.
or study any of Dr. Joe Dispenza's stuff? Do you know who
Yes,
that is?
totally.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I
Yep.
don't know if you've heard his take on field trip. When we were a kid, you wake up and he's like, what happened when it was field trip day? You couldn't wait to get out of bed and get dressed and eat breakfast and go to school. Why? Because you were going on a field trip that day and you didn't know what was going to happen, but you knew something unexpected was going to be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the anticipation of, so it's just
Mm-hmm.
like that same mindset
Mm-hmm.
of putting ourselves back in a, 7-year-old's
Yeah.
mindset of like, the past is behind me, the mundane days back there, but this
Yep.
new unknown future is going to be really cool. So I think about that a lot when I'm stuck in a position of like,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't going to work. Why? Right? What if it does? What if it works out better than you
Yeah. Yeah.
anticipated?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love part of the thing with the field trip too from Dr. Spencer is the adventure of it all. And in some ways, the older
Yeah.
we get, the more evidence that we have that it won't work out.
Yeah.
But it's like it's outside of the regular rhythm and the flow of the day. Like you're shaking things up, and so that's a lot of what I want to do as a coach is to help kind of shake some things up, not in a way to like screw you over, but to
Yeah.
really open up possibility
Sure. Sure.
and to get you out of the daily grind. We are creatures of habit. We need to be able to create those rhythms and structures and patterns that are sustainable and that are going to serve us well, but a lot of times they don't. And
Hmm.
so the field trip idea is like, let's pull you out of being in the classroom from 7 until 3, and you have the same order of classes and you get the same books out and you do recess at the same time and you eat the same thing for lunch. And let's mix that up a little bit so that you can see what else is possible on the other side of it. And that, yeah, I think so much of adulthood is kind of going back to some of that childhood stuff that helps to bring us back to life.
Yeah, I totally agree. April, I always like to ask high achievers, and so you are example A in this. How do you personally, I guess, stay grounded, disconnect, kind of bring it back to center when you're building and coaching and leading, and you talked about in the beginning of this podcast about coaching leaders, high achieving leaders who just crash and burn. How do you catch yourself? Is there practices that you have that you instill in your life? Like I have to, like my therapist told me one time, like you need to instill it before it's needed, right? It's like if you're
Yes.
starting, if the
Yes.
starting line here is and the finish line is here, be it today or this week, like you need to build that in somewhere before you get to the finish line or it's going to be too late. So do you have anything that you lean towards,
Uh-huh.
and you have any rhythms and,
Yeah.
and set patterns that
Yeah.
you look at?
Yes, lots and lots. And I'm a work in progress because I am, again, very ambitious and goals driven. And I've got lots of energy and lots of capacity and more dreams than I can complete in my lifetime. So, I mean, my coach, like I said, 20 years ago, really did shift the trajectory for me. And in different seasons of life, there are things that I pick up and put back down and new things that I add in because we're ever evolving, right? Like the phrase like I contain multitudes is true, right? Like so the things that I do today are different than even a year ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Um, but I'll tell you a few things that like I'm currently doing and then some things from the throwback. Currently, I don't work on weekends. Saturdays and Sundays, I don't check my email. I don't respond to calls. I shut it down because that's when I am recovering and I experience renewal. It's when I get to be with my family in the most concentrated of contexts. Um, it is when I get to explore the things that are in my identity and in my character that are outside of the contributions that I make to the world. So it really, the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays are really like a shutdown. And I shut it off so that I can focus on other parts of who I am and other people that are important to me. Similarly, at the end of the day, I have a rhythm where like I shut down my computer and I clean up my work area. So I literally like close the laptop, I put the keyboard away, I put my to-do list in the drawer. I just have like this little routine where I'm putting stuff away at the end of the workday so that I know this part of my work and my life is done and I'm going to shift into a different gear and be with people in a different way. Um, I use walking a lot in a way to help connect my left brain and my right brain and problem solve and kind of disconnect from work in that way, like particularly like when I'm experiencing or feeling like some big challenges, walking is a really helpful thing. So I'll do that alone. I'll do that with my husband. Um, and that is, it's a good way for the stress to metabolize through my body. And so another practice that is helpful for me is working out in some way, shape, or form. I've had some really crazy health challenges these last 2 years that have been like really profoundly damaging and significant. But like movement is really helpful for me to metabolize stress. So whether that's yoga or walking, like I said, or HIIT workouts, whatever, like being able to like allow my body to process through my experiences. So those are the biggest ones for me. Oh, I have a bunch of those features on my iPhone where it's like do not disturb. So I have things set up where like if I'm on a coaching call and I'm walking, literally nothing or no one can connect with me other than my husband and my kids. So no notifications will come up because it allows me to be really focused and it allows me to not have my brain go in a whole bunch of different directions, which is helpful as one of ADHD. Or like in my weekends or in the mornings. I've got a current practice right now that I'm doing with the mastermind group that I'm leading. That is when I wake up first thing in the morning, I practice the perfect breath, which is biologically, our bodies are designed to experience this breath, which is a 5.5 second inhale through the nose and then a 5.5 second exhale through your nose. And I do that for 2 minutes first thing in the morning. And as I'm practicing that perfect breath, I have a like an affirmation mantra that I repeat, which is I will not be distracted from my very important work. And that's the like I will not be distracted is the inhale, for my very important work is the exhale. Because there's a lot that distracts me. In the news, in my own life, in my family, like there's a lot going on for all of us, right? And so that helps me to really stay focused. So those are like real present things. Historically, and especially being a founder, this is, being a leader and running a business, the work never ends. Like I could literally be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it would just be never ending. And so I had a coach a couple years ago, and he was like, I want you to put a notification on your calendar, like a scheduled appointment that's called wrap up. And so from 5 to 5:30 every day, there was this wrap up 30 minutes where it was literally just tying up any loose ends from the day, whether it was final emails or, voice memos to people or a final phone call or knocking off a couple of the tasks on your to-do list. And by 5:30, it was like that was the last meeting that was being done. And that meeting was, with me, myself, and I. And then I shut it down. And that was a really helpful practice for a while. So, yeah, those kinds of energy breaks are really valuable.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like that's something everybody needs to hear, right? Be it in your personal life or if you're an employee or if you're an entrepreneur, is just having that balance. And I think it's, being willing enough to not like take the guilt and shame with it, to be like, I should be doing more. I should be, doing this. I should be doing that. But
Yeah.
having that awareness just
Mm-hmm.
to take care of yourself before burnout takes place. So thank you for sharing that. April, I have two final questions
Mm-hmm.
for you. The first one, and I'll kind of customize for you. When you think of the past 6 years of starting Ezer and going through the experience you did and taking that year off to really heal and define like what you wanted the next chapter to look like, what's one thing you've learned about yourself if you've traveled down this path?
Hmm. I think I may have said this earlier, but I think the most important thing that I've learned, relearned over and over and over again, it's like the recurring lesson for me, is that I am the most important person that I will ever lead. And I'm the most difficult person I will ever lead. um, but when I do that, everything else and everyone else benefits. And so I spend a disproportionate amount of time, energy, resources on this one, on this girl, because I just know that when I don't do it, there's a lot of consequences and collateral damage. So I think that is kind of like one of my lifelong lessons, and it has had different iterations over the years. Um, but I think that's a pretty core message to who I am.
Mm, it's beautiful. This last question, so apropos that I should ask this last question, and you started this whole conversation off with talking about the whisper, and I thought this is going to be a good conversation. So my last question is, what
All
advice would
right.
you give to someone who hears the whisper of a dream that just seems too scary to chase?
Mm, mm, yeah. Um, a few things come to mind. One is I think that dreams are holy. Like, I think that they've been given to you for a reason. And to ignore it or kill it or not pay attention to it, I think is really damaging. I think it shuts out and down a lot. And so the first thing I would say is listen to the dream and maybe write it down. Um, Dreams evolve and iterate over time. I mean, certainly that's true even in the last 7 years for me as Ezer has come to life. And, I'm 6 years now into this, leading this company. It is the dream has changed and morphed. And so write it down, listen to it, pay attention to it. And then the other thing is like, do something, take one step. You're not going to have it all figured out. It's not going to, you don't have to quit your job tomorrow. You don't have to like sell everything that you own. You don't have to have it all figured out. I mean, literally when I launched Ezer, Michael, I only had our name and I had our website, ezerco.com, and I had the Instagram handle. That's literally all I had. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have a financial model. I didn't have fleshed out offerings or services. I didn't have a board. I didn't have investors. I had nothing else. Like I had nothing that all the old white guys told me that I needed to have to start a company. Like nothing. It was a shit show. But I had a dream, and I had like just the most basic of elements. And I really sensed God say to me, build this company in the company of other warrior women and men. Build it with them. And that felt horrifically vulnerable for me, like just because I wouldn't have my shit together and I wouldn't have, you know, laid out the whole plan and be like, come and follow me. We will do all these wonderful things in the world. Like I just had the dream and my own story in it all. Um, but what I've seen over the last 6 years has been really beautiful. It's been evolving with these other people. And so like that's what will happen with your dream too, is if you take one step, then you'll know the next step and then you'll know the next step and do it despite the fear. I mean, in some ways I feel like I've been scared every day for the last 6 years. Like it's just part of the reality of going to a new place that you've never been and doing something you've never done before is a slight amount of panic. Total like we crash and burn or we fly. I don't know. But
Right.
do something, because as you do something, the vision, the dream will get clearer and clearer, and you will begin to birth more of it into the world.
Thank you. That was awesome. Um, April, thanks for being here with me. I'm going to put your website and your Instagram in the show notes. Is there any other contact information or best ways for the audience to reach you and find out more about your coaching services?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to offer to your folks. We have a shorter 20-question quiz that if you want to figure out and just have some clarity around where are you right now in your own holistic leadership journey, this 20-question quiz is really helpful. It gives you kind of that high level overview of how you're doing in each of the 6 different parts of your holistic leadership, and then gives some next steps and some practical tools for you to do that. So I'd love to kind of link that to the show notes for your folks and encourage them to take the quiz, and then I'm happy to follow up with you directly if you've got questions or you want to process through. We offer a clarity call on the flip side of taking that assessment as well. So I just think if this is kind of raising some flags, or your heart is beating a little bit faster, or there's a resonation with what we've talked about today, that quiz would be really, really valuable. So yeah, we'll link it in the show notes and we'll offer it to your folks.
That is awesome. Thank you for offering that. We will 100% put that in the show notes with all of April's contact information. Again, it's April Diaz with Ezer and Company. Check all of her information out. And April, thanks for being here. Have an awesome rest of your day.
My privilege. Thanks for having me, Michael.